Hi, you're listening to Burn Beautiful, a podcast for women ready to step into their divine feminine leadership so they can create a life of joy, health, and impact beyond their wildest dreams. Here, you'll learn how to heal stress from the inside out, reclaim your vibrant health, and master your energy so you can lead powerfully without burning out and actually enjoy the moments that matter most in this one beautiful and precious life. I'm Nicole Whitaker, burnout and leadership coach, founder of Lead Up Health, and creator of the H.E.R.S method. Welcome. Hello, and welcome back to Burn Beautiful, the podcast for ambitious, heart-led women who are ready to lead with more alignment, more joy, and way less stress. Today, we're diving into one of my absolute favorite topics in the H.E.R.S framework, which is energy mastery. So specifically, we're going to talk about what energy is, why it matters tremendously in life and leadership, from how happy and effective you are to the quality of your relationships and your leadership, the three barriers that prevent most of us from mastering our energy, and how to overcome those barriers with three simple but highly effective strategies. So that we're all on the same page, when I say energy mastery, I'm talking specifically about the ability for you to direct and protect your time, your energy, and your emotions, and also how to vibe high, so to speak, so that instead of living from a place of stress and reactivity, you're able to create your life, leadership, and relationships with intentionality and with alignment. As some of you might know, when I started Lead Up Health, my organization, I focused primarily on holistic health. That is what I supported my leaders with. That's what I supported my career moms with, because that is where I had done most of my personal healing up to that point. And it was really powerful. But as I continued to evolve, I realized that this real transformation wasn't just physical, it was energetic. So for me, while focusing on my health and well-being helped me to feel and act like myself again, which is most certainly half the battle, right? I would still sometimes get caught in these stress and negativity loops. So, for example, my husband and I would have like the same argument on repeat, just with a different context. Or I'd get frustrated with my kids and end up doing the same thing, holding it in and then raising my voice and then feeling guilty. Or I'd run into the same challenge with the same person at work. It was almost like having this out of body experience where like I could see myself repeating these ineffective patterns, but in the moment, I did not know how to change things. So once I learned how to shift my energy, I was able to get out of those patterns I'd been in for years, or if I'm honest, probably my entire life. And it's when my marriage changed, the way I parent changed, and I was really able to level up my leadership in ways that I hadn't been able to before. So I shifted my internal energy, and that's when my external world began to change. And the science, some of which I'll share with you today, supports all of this. So, mid or launch of Lead Up Health, I did the one thing that you're definitely not supposed to do, and I changed course to include energy mastery and create the H.E.R.S pillars because I just couldn't not teach this or utilize these methods to support my clients because of the outsized impact it had on my life. And then I now see it has in others' lives. So let's jump into this. So let's begin by defining energy. What is energy? And talk about why it is so important. So, energy is literally everything. From the chair you're sitting in, yes, that's energy. We're just perceiving it as an object, to the phone you're listening to this on, to emotions that we have. And so, at the most basic level, quantum science shows us this. It shows that everything is vibrating particles that create patterns of information moving through fields. So, to talk about our bodies and how this works in our bodies, for instance, this shows up as electromagnetic waves, with the heart producing the most powerful field. So, when our emotions are stressed, these waves that we actually emit in a radius around us of up to 6 feet, they've been able to measure this. When our emotions are stressful, those waves become jagged and incoherent, like static, like scattering our energy and our clarity. But when we feel emotions like love and gratitude, our heart and brain waves actually sync up into smooth, coherent patterns. You can kind of think of it like a symphony first being out of tune and then shifting to be in harmony. And that coherence doesn't just shift our physiology. As I mentioned, it radiates outward. And so that means it's actually influencing how we connect, how we lead, and impact the people around us. So, a practical example that we've seen and likely experienced is this concept of co regulation, especially with a child, right? So, when a child is upset, it doesn't really matter what we say, but it does matter how we say things and what our energy is like around them. So, if we ourselves can enter their energetic field with calmness, right? That calm voice, that calm presence, they'll also calm down, at least eventually, right? And so that's an example of how our energy field interacts with others and can actually impact their own emotions, their own states of being. So, Michael Beckwith, the leader of Agape, talks a lot about what he calls our feeling tone. And this is not to be confused with emotions. So, I love the way he speaks of this. The feeling tone is really that energetic vibration underneath our thoughts and our words. It's the tone with which we live our life, like our baseline. He says that everything is energy, and this feeling tone we live in is the broadcast that we're sending into the field. And so, for in stress and fear or resentment, that incoherent tone, right, it tends to manifest more chaos and disorder in our lives. But when we shift into love and gratitude or joy, our heart and mind come into coherence, and our feeling tone, as he puts it, aligns with the greater harmony of the universe. So, from that state, we don't just feel better, we actually begin to draw in new possibilities into our lives, and we become a beneficial presence for others. So, this, is manifestation, and it is not fluff. So, this is physics, it's neuroscience, and it's also a leadership strategy. So, energy is measurable, it's transferable. And if you're leading a team or an organization, and by the way, you're a leader if you manage anyone, if you're a parent, if you're an older sibling, right? If anyone is looking to you for guidance or to set the tone, your energy is either expanding or constricting what is possible for yourself and others. And I want to go way back in time and share this excerpt by Ham Janot. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. That I actually stumbled upon my first years of teaching. And it's just, I would read it. I had it on my desk and I would read it at the start of pretty much every day because it talks about this concept so beautifully and how much of an impact as a teacher or leader or parent we have on those that we're supporting. And so here it is. It says, I've come to a frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element in the classroom. It is my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess a tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de escalated, and a child humanized or dehumanized. Ooh, it's so powerful, right? I don't know. I got choked up there for a second because it just talks about, first of all, um, how powerful we really are, but more so, um, the tremendous amount of good or harm we can do based on how well we are able to master our energy and show up for others. It's just critical. And this is really becoming mainstream. If you've been keeping up with the news articles and research in leadership, we all know, that AI is on the rise, and that even beyond that, leadership is becoming much more human centered. It's because knowledge and those hard skills really are not the differentiator anymore between an okay and an excellent leader. I'd argue they never were, but they most certainly are not in this age of information where AI can do the analytics, can gather the knowledge for us. A recently published McKinsey article, The Inside Out Leadership Journey, does a really good job explaining why this type of energy work is important for leaders. They said, it is imperative for leaders to develop the inner resources to navigate the demands of their many stakeholders in a fast changing world. When leaders work on resilience, empathy, humility, versatility, and authenticity, they are pursuing that inside out personal growth that leads to human leadership. And so that's what we're really talking about today, what we're learning about today, building that inner capacity to lead with clarity, calm, and deep presence from the inside out. So let's jump into what typically gets in the way of this energy mastery that is so important, and then the accompanying strategies that can give you more control over your energy today. So, before we get into that, I do just want to return to what I mentioned earlier, which is the first step is always to establish a baseline of physical health. And by that, I mean how you're sleeping, how you're moving your body, and how you are nurturing your body with food. That is why in my program, the H and Hers, the Hers method, the H stands for holistic health. And if my clients don't have that as a baseline, we do begin there. I've shared all of this in the past podcasts. I could share the science, but just quite simply, you can think of a time when you're trying to function on, say, 2 hours of sleep versus 7 or 8, and how you respond to a stressful moment, a toddler tantrum, something going wrong at work, right? It's going to be a whole lot harder on those 2 hours of sleep. And so, this is once we have that foundation, that basic foundation established. Talking specifically about energy mastery, though, even when health is stable, this can be hard for a few reasons. And I'm going to walk you through the top 3 things that keep us from mastering that energy and those simple shifts to address each. So, these shifts are the shifts that changed my energy, and they will change yours by transforming how you lead, how you're showing up at home, and just how you move through the world as a woman who leads from wholeness instead of stress. So, the first thing, the first big obstacle to having complete mastery over our energy is that stress compounds to the point where we are just in overwhelm. And the analogy that is common, and I think is a great one, so I'm going to use it here, is to think about a cup, right? Like a glass cup, and stressors that happen throughout the day as water being poured into that cup. And so, if you're a mom or a parent, in addition to being a leader, by 9 a.m., you've had 20 different stressors, right? It may be a tantrum, maybe rushing out the door, who knows, all kinds of things that can happen before you even sit down to lead that meeting. And so what happens is, our cup, we're pouring the water and it gets fuller and fuller until all of a sudden it is overflowing, and it is overflowing. That is when we're in an emotionally flooded state. We're overwhelmed. And it's because we haven't had a chance, or we haven't taken the chance to pour some of that water out or relieve some of that stress as it hits us throughout the day. And then when that small thing happens, right? When your cup is all the way full, but you're left off of an email or not included in a decision at work, or your kid is deciding to take a decade to brush their teeth, you're going to lose it, right? We lose it. So here's the antidote, or here is how you're going to keep yourself from being emotionally flooded and reacting from stress instead of choosing to respond from a place of calm. You need to notice and then move stress out of your body frequently and efficiently. So stress, remember, it's not just mental. It lives physically in the body. And what's most important here is that you need to catch yourself early. Okay. So it's that moment where you start to feel stressed or irritated or ticky, as one of my friends called it this past weekend, about like that edgy feeling you start to feel towards your partner or your kids. when, your partner opens that bag of cereal too loudly, right? That when you notice that like annoyance in your body, that's your moment of power. If you catch it there, you can respond quickly. It's going to take a minute. But if you miss it, you're going to build, 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 and you're going to be emotionally flooded. And we all know that feeling or saying of doing something from stress, right? And then be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I responded this way or I yelled or whatever it is. So these are your 3 steps to shift your energy that moment that you notice that stress is arising. I want you to first, just when you become aware of it, notice where it is in the body. Ooh, I feel that in my chest, or in my jaw. The second thing, and most people miss this, they want to jump straight to number 3, is you actually have to upregulate stress. Okay. Stress and anxiety is an active energy. Okay. So you can't jump straight into taking deep breaths. You actually need to move that stress, that active energy through your body. Okay. You can do a number of things. It could be a 10-second thing. Shake your hands, shake your body, dance, jump up and down a few times. Step outside if you are able to, but do something physical to just move that energy out of your body. Then your body, and you'll notice it. You'll notice when that energy has moved out physically. Then you're ready to down regulate with something like breath, with stillness or closing your eyes, or just saying something grounding to return to calm. Okay. So real quick, it's when the second you notice that stress or that irritation, you're going to stop and notice it where it is in your body. Name it, it's in my chest and jaw. You're going to upregulate it, meaning you're going to do something active. And then you're going to downregulate it, like breathing to calm your body down. This is a minute-long process, okay? But what's interesting, and I'm 110% guilty of this, is that the hardest part is actually doing it. Most of us, especially ambitious women, are programmed just to push through, ignore it, where we don't even notice that we're getting into that state of irritation. We're in back to back meetings, we're caring for kids, meal prepping, running the show. So stopping for 60 seconds to move our body, it's just like, no, it feels inconvenient. So you have to set yourself up for success. Simple things. If you can, make meeting length 50 minutes instead of 60 so you can rest and empty that cup between meetings. I do this with my husband, have a tap in, tap out system with your partner or your kids. So if you're handling something and you're feeling, ticky, quote unquote, tap in your partner and step out for a minute or two, right? In the end, it saves time and it will make you a better leader and a better parent. And when you do this, I want you to try this today. And I want you to note how you feel after and how it impacted how you shut up for your team or for your kids or your partner. Because when you start noticing the impact, it will become a habit. All right, so that's the first obstacle. Our cup's getting too full, and you now have a strategy to pour some of that water out throughout the day before you get into that overwhelm. So the second really big reason it is hard to master our energy is because we're running on old programming or inaccurate stories about ourselves and others, and they are literally weighing us down and holding us back. Okay. So now we're getting into some of that deeper inner work, the kind that McKinsey calls that inside out leadership journey. And this is especially relevant for ambitious women navigating leadership in cultures where burnout is normalized, where your worth is often measured by how much you can juggle or produce. So we're all carrying around, all of us, what I like to call emotional backpacks. And I'm going to explain that in a second. These emotional backpacks are weighing us down and keeping us from that light, happy state of vibing high. So these emotional backpacks are filled with stories we have been telling ourselves about the world and who we are that first of all, we typically don't even realize we're telling ourselves these stories. And two, we typically didn't put them there ourselves, right? It came from our upbringing or from society. And three, they almost always tie back to our feelings of worthiness and not feeling enough in some way. So these typically form in childhood. For example, I shared in the last episode that I have this story in my head about belonging, like I don't belong or don't fit in, that came from me moving around a lot as a kid. So the first time I move, I had a hard time making friends. Okay, fine. But then it happens again and again until all of a sudden I have this story in my head that it's hard for me to make friends. And each time I have an experience that seems to confirm that that's true, it's like adding a rock into this, what I'm calling this emotional backpack, the emotional backpack being this story, this incorrect story that I have about myself and who I am and what I can or cannot do. And these rocks with each new experience are added until that emotional backpack is weighing us down quite literally and holding us back. And so these bleed directly into adulthood. So, say, for example, you step into a new leadership role and a direct report challenges your decision in a meeting. Maybe you keep your composure, but inside a piece of you might be thinking, they don't respect me. I don't belong in this title. And then perhaps a few days later, a senior leader questions your team's timeline on a project and you read into it, right? They think I'm in over my head. Or then a colleague gets praised for their management style and suddenly you're comparing, right? Another stone into that backpack until these moments that might seem small, again, you might not even be aware that you're having these subconscious thoughts, but each one can build into a subconscious belief, right? I'm not a strong enough leader. And here's what happens next. You start to lead from that place, if unaddressed, right? You second guess decisions, you hesitate to give feedback, you overfunction to compensate. This is, again, mostly subconscious. And without realizing it, your team might begin to feel that uncertainty that you're emitting. And then your leadership isn't as effective as it could be. So, this is how that emotional backpack works, right? Even if you're hitting goals on paper, the weight of those old stories can shape how you show up and then how others respond, right? It's that energetic feedback loop. But here's the important part. These events that happened on their own, right? A direct report asking about a decision you made, the questioning of a timeline, or a colleague getting praised don't actually mean anything. They actually have zero meaning standalone, right? We assign those events meaning based on those old stories that we have. So when your colleague gets praised, I mean, when we think about it logically, we know that has nothing to do with your effectiveness. But if you have a story in your head, then we're going to take that as a piece of evidence to confirm, oh, they're better than me, or oh, I can't cut it like she can. And it has a name. It's called confirmation bias. So we are constantly, without knowing it, again, gathering evidence to support our pre existing beliefs. This is why it is so hard for people to change beliefs about anything, about themselves, about politics, about anything. And because 95% of our thoughts are subconscious, we don't even realize that we're gathering those pieces of evidence to support this story, or that our old stories are weighing us down and holding us back from even greater success. Okay. So that was a little wah depressing, but don't worry. There is a way to lighten the load. And when we're able to kind of recognize these patterns, we can undo them and really free ourselves. So, how do we lighten this load? Step one is awareness. So, starting with the emotional charge, the stronger your reaction or your emotional reaction is to a moment, right? The team member questioning your decision or whatever it is, the deeper the story behind it, right? The more rocks in that emotional backpack you have. But when you bring awareness to it, just that awareness begins to change things. And step two is separating the event from the meaning you're assigning it, as I mentioned before. So here is a specific strategy that I absolutely love. It's from Katie Byron, who's incredible. It's a version, it's an adaptation from her process. And these are the three questions you're going to ask yourself next time you notice this experience coming forward for you. So the first is, what story am I telling myself? That's that awareness. But these next two are where it's at. So the second question you need to ask yourself is it actually true? Is it actually true that because the senior leader is questioning my timeline, that she thinks I'm in over my head or that I am in over my head? And then the third is, but how do I know it's true? Right? Maybe the senior leader just didn't understand the timeline. Maybe you actually have more expertise on the specifics than she does, and she just needs more clarity around that, right? Or maybe she has a helpful insight that could actually shift the timeline that has nothing to do with whether you're in over your head or not. Okay. So the more you can realize an old story or that emotional backpack might be weighing you down, the more you can separate events from the meaning that you're subconsciously assigning it. And when you do this, that negative story about yourself doesn't carry as much weight. It's literally like throwing out a stone or a boulder out of that backpack each time you do it until all of a sudden that story no longer exists. The emotional backpack is gone, and energetically and emotionally, you literally feel lighter. Now, for many of us, for many stories, it's a lifelong journey, right? This is, I believe we are here to evolve and learn. But each time you do this, you're going to feel lighter and more empowered. And this is exactly what energy mastery is all about. So every old story in that emotional backpack isn't just psychological, it is energetic. So that means each stone you carry can create incoherence in your system. Um, your heart rhythm can get jagged when this comes up. Your brain waves lose focus, and your whole presence can feel heavy to yourself and to others. So when you're leading from those old stories, even if you're unaware, your team can pick up on that energy, can feel the tension before you even say a word. But when you start to throw those stones out, you're reclaiming your energy. And this can turn on a dime in the moment, but it's also a longer term piece. In the moment, if you do that exercise, you're going to shift your energy right away. But of course, we're going to be returning to these stories in different ways to throw more of those stones out throughout the course of our life. And so when this happens, your system comes back into coherence. You're more present, more clear, and people feel that, right? This is truly energy mastery in action, shifting from being run by old programming to leading from your true aligned state, right? Because you are not your stories. So the third really big thing that gets in the way of mastering our energy is this. It is waiting for confidence or waiting for our energy to shift before we act. This is a huge misconception around energy because in reality, it is actually action that shifts our energy. So those old identity stories in our emotional backpack can lock energy in place. And if you're carrying the belief, not enough or I don't belong, you end up broadcasting that same incoherent vibration of self doubt. And because energy attracts like energy, life is giving you more quote unquote evidence to confirm the story. So the way out is to pair awareness with action. So this is rewiring through identity-based action. James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, puts it this way. Every action you take becomes a vote for the identity that you want to become. So I love practicing this. I think it's a fun experiment. And so I have a personal example for you from literally just last week. In the last podcast, I shared a bit about how because I moved around as a kid, my emotional backpack story, one of them, one of many of them, is I'm not good at making friends. Or I think a co-story I have about living here in St. Louis is, my people aren't here. They're elsewhere. And so last Saturday, my kids are now almost 7 and 8. So I'm in a place where they're more independent and I could actually potentially begin having a friend or hanging out with someone because I have enough time now. And so last Saturday, I decided to run a little experiment on myself and just assume that I'm super friendly and good at making friends. I was like, let me just practice this. Let me just pretend. And so that day, I went to an open house that there was like a show of showing these like lovely fancy houses in St. Louis, and my mom wanted me to go, and so I joined her. And we were looking at the house and the homeowner was there. And typically I'd, walk up to the homeowner, I'd be polite, like, "Hey, thanks for showing me your house, da da da," and then I'd move on. But this time I hung back for a beat and I decided, let me try being friendly. Let me strike up a conversation. And so I asked them about their kids and we had just a great, mini 3-minute conversation. I that is very out of character for me. But all of a sudden there's a vote towards my identity of being a friendly person. Later in that day, I was texting back and forth with another neighborhood parent about sending my kids home. And typically it's strictly business, like, "Oh, can you send them home? Oh, this, oh, that." But this time I chatted her, "Oh, I heard you're painting a room. How's it going?" Right? Again, very out of character for me. And so we ended up chatting just a little bit. And so for those of you who are like outgoing and extroverted, you're like, "Yeah, so what?" But you have to understand that for me, that's out of character. And so these small actions are rewriting my story about my capacity to make friends, right? They're small actions, but it was a big rewiring actually. At the end of the day, I felt friendly, legitimately. And like oh, maybe I am good at this whole building friendship things or being friendly. And I created evidence, right? New evidence for a new identity, the identity of I am good at making friends. And so this is how, through action, that we shift identity and that we shift the energy from the inside out. So, yes, that was a personal example, but I hope that you can see how that would apply in the context of leadership as well. Because here's the thing, when you do this as a leader, the ripple effects are massive. Think back to that example I shared earlier, right? You step into a new role and a direct report challenges your decision in a meeting. If your old story of I'm not a strong enough leader is running the show, your energy is going to shift to meet that lower vibration. Even if you keep your composure, right? Because I think as leaders, we're very good at keeping that outward composure. That broadcast, that energetic broadcast cast is still broadcasting doubt and your team will pick up on it. And then suddenly there's feelings of uncertainty, etc. But if you've been practicing identity-based action, right? Showing up with the energy of I belong here, I've got this, right? That same situation is going to play out very differently. Instead of tightening up or maybe ignoring the comment or just breezing past it, you're going to stay grounded. You're going to get curious. You're going to say, really, what do you think about that? Or why do you think that? Tell me from a place of curiosity, not defensiveness, right? Instead of proving yourself, you could ask a clarifying question or lean into collaboration. That coherent energy communicates strength and authenticity without you having to force it. And your team is going to feel safe. They're going to trust you more and they're going to follow your lead. So that's the power of energy mastery in motion. You're not just managing stress, you are literally rewiring the energy that you bring into a room. And that is going to shift the people, the culture, and ultimately the results that you are able to deliver. So let's land the plane. Here's what I want you to take from today's episode. One, energy is everything. It's not just emotional or mental, it is physical, measurable, and it shapes how you lead, how you parent and relate. When your energy is coherent, right, with those positive emotions, you expand what is possible. When it's incoherent or operating from a place of stress, you unintentionally constrict it. Number 2, your stress cup matters. If you don't empty it throughout the day, even the smallest thing can tip you into overwhelm. And that is going to have an impact, yes, on you and your happiness and well being and success, but also others. Remember co regulation. So the strategy is to move stress out of your body first with upregulating movement, and then calm your system down with downregulation or breathing. Number 3, your emotional backpack is real. Those old stories you carry about worth, belonging, or being enough weigh you down and leak into how you show up. And remember, everybody has these. There's nothing to be ashamed of here. But we want to lighten the load by noticing the story, separating it from the event, and throwing out those old stones one by one so we can stop assigning meaning to events, to making things personal. And number 4, action rewires energy. So don't wait for confidence before you act. Every small action aligned with the identity and the energy that you want is a vote for the leader you're becoming. Action is what is going to shift your energy, and energy shifts your impact. At the end of the day, energy mastery isn't about perfection. It is simply about awareness, practice, and choosing to lead from coherence instead of stress. When you shift your energy, you don't just change how you feel, you change how everyone around you feels. And that, my friend, is the kind of leadership that creates safety, trust, and real transformation. So this week, try one of the strategies, notice your stress cup, question your story in your backpack, take one identity-based action, and then just pay attention to how it changes not just your state, but the energy in the room. Because the way you lead yourself sets the tone for everything and everyone else. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you got a ton out of it. Until next time, burn beautiful, loves. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode sparked something in you, subscribe, and I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to rate and review the show. It is the most powerful way to help other women find it. And if you know someone who is struggling or on the edge of burnout or simply wants to lead from wholeness, send this their way. Let's grow this movement together. To get exclusive insights, tools, and behind-the-scenes support, join the H.E.R.S Insider List at www.leaduphealth.com. And if you're ready to explore working together, whether through coaching or consulting, you can book a free consultation right from the site. Until next time, burn beautiful, loves.